Welcome back, everyone. It feels great to be kicking off the new year with a deep dive into a topic that's been generating quite a bit of buzz in the AI world.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a lot of folks are talking about this one.
We're talking about OpenAI and their new model O3.
Right, right. O3, lots of big claims about its performance, especially on some really complex benchmarks.
Exactly. OpenAI is making some pretty bold statements about specifically O3's performance on something called frontier math. Now, I know some of our listeners might not be super familiar with that, so
Yeah, frontier math, basically think of it as a test, like a really, really hard test, designed to see how well an AI can solve these super advanced mathematical problems.
and OpenAI says O3 aced it, right?
Well, they say it achieved a 25% accuracy rate, which honestly, if you look at the previous best, which was only 2%, I mean, that's a gigantic leap.
Okay, so yeah, that's pretty impressive. I mean, from practically nothing to solving one out of every four problems.
Yeah, it's definitely turning some heads, but, there's always more to the story, right?
Right. And that's why we're here. So the article we're diving into today, it suggests that OpenAI's relationship with frontier math might be a little bit more complicated than just, showing up and taking the test.
Yeah, it seems like they were a little more involved behind the scenes.
The article actually reveals that OpenAI was involved in funding the development of frontier math. And get this, they had access to a good chunk of the data, like beforehand.
Yeah, and that's where things start to get a little murky.
So hold on. They were working on the test that they were going to be judged on. I mean, doesn't that seem like, I don't know, a conflict of interest?
It definitely raises some eyebrows. I mean, you have some AI experts drawing comparisons to, Theranos.
Oh, wow. The blood testing company that, well, basically turned out to be a massive fraud.
Yeah, exactly. The article even quotes Gary Marcus. He's a pretty big name in AI research, and he's basically saying, hey, this situation has some serious Theranos vibes.
Wow. Okay. So are people saying that OpenAI is intentionally trying to, like, mislead the public about what O3 can actually do?
Well, the article doesn't go that far, but it definitely points out a lack of transparency on OpenAI's part. Like, this whole thing about their involvement with Frontier Math, this wasn't public knowledge until very recently.
Interesting.
Yeah, and apparently Epoch AI, the group that's behind Frontier Math, they were contractually obligated to keep OpenAI's involvement hush-hush.
Wow. Okay. Contractually obligated. So it makes you wonder, like, why wouldn't they want people to know about this partnership from the get-go?
The article mentions that Epoch AI's associate director, what was his name? Tamay Bisiroglu, I think. He basically admits that, yeah, maybe they messed up by not being more upfront about everything.
Right.
He says they were kind of stuck, because of the contract with OpenAI, but in hindsight, they probably should handled it differently.
Okay, so back to the data thing. If OpenAI had access to some of it beforehand, wouldn't that give them a huge leg up? Like, couldn't they have basically trained O3 on those specific problems to make sure it got a good score?
Yeah, that's a valid point for sure. But OpenAI is saying that they also tested O3 on a part of the frontier math data it hadn't seen before, like a holdout set.
Right, right. So they're trying to say the high score was just because, O3 had already seen the answers, essentially.
Exactly. That's pretty standard practice in AI research, actually, using this holdout set, to make sure the model isn't just memorizing the answers.
Okay, that makes sense. But it still feels a little, I don't know, suspicious, maybe.
I get it. And you know what? It's not just AI experts who are feeling uneasy about this whole situation. The article mentions that a lot of the mathematicians who actually helped create frontier math, they had no clue about OpenAI's involvement.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, like they thought they were helping to build this fair and objective benchmark, and then to find out that, one of the players had this inside track, it's understandable that they'd be a little upset.
I can only imagine. It does kind of feel like a bit of a betrayal, right?
The article even quotes this one mathematician, Karina Han. She's a PhD candidate at Stanford. She says that some mathematicians might have actually backed out, not contributed to frontier math if they'd known about OpenAI's access to the data.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It really makes you question the whole foundation of the benchmark, doesn't it?
It definitely raises some serious questions about how we should be evaluating these AI systems, especially when you have these big companies with, let's be honest, massive resources and potentially conflicting interests.
That's a really good point, and it's something we need to keep in mind as we continue to explore, O3 and its capabilities.
Right, because this isn't just about O3, it's about the bigger picture. How do we ensure that AI development is transparent and trustworthy? That's a conversation we need to be having.
Absolutely. It's a conversation we need to have, and it's one we'll be continuing right after the break.
It's a big question, no doubt. I mean, how do we make sure all this AI stuff is being developed in a way that's, ethical, responsible?
Right. Like, are we just blindly trusting these companies to do the right thing? Because this whole frontier math situation, it kind of makes you wonder.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It definitely raises some red flags about transparency. And, speaking of big claims, the article also talks about how O3 performed on a different benchmark. This one's called RRCAGI.
RCAGI. Okay.
hmm
I've heard of that. It's all about, like, testing for artificial general intelligence, right?
Exactly. It's trying to figure out if an AI can actually solve problems and reason in a way that's, similar to us humans. It's not just about like specialized skills, it's about being flexible, adaptable, that kind of general intelligence.
And what did OpenAI say about O3's performance on that one?
They said it scored almost 90%, which they claim is even better than how humans perform.
90%. Come on. That's like straight out of science fiction. Are we all going to be replaced by robots now?
Well, hold your horses. It's a big claim for sure. But even with this one, there's a good amount of skepticism floating around.
Really? Why? I mean, 90% sounds pretty convincing to me.
Here's the interesting part. The guy who actually created the ARC-AGI benchmark, a researcher named Francois Chollet, he's publicly said that he doesn't buy it. Like, he doesn't think O3 has actually achieved artificial general intelligence, even with that high score.
Hold on. The person who designed the test doesn't think O3 actually passed it. I'm confused.
I know, right? That's kind of a head-scratcher. But Chollet's argument is that while O3 might be amazing at solving certain types of problems, it doesn't show that same kind of broad understanding and adaptability that we see in human intelligence.
Okay, so like it can crunch numbers and solve puzzles, but it's not actually thinking like a human.
Pretty much. He points out that there are still some pretty simple tasks on the ARC-AGI benchmark that O3 just can't handle, which suggests that its intelligence isn't as general as that 90% score might make it seem.
So it's like it's missing that, I don't know, that spark of true understanding, right?
That's a good way to put it. And this whole thing, it really gets to the heart of this big debate about how we even define and measure artificial general intelligence. It's not a simple concept. You can't just like put it in a box and say, yep, this is it. And a single benchmark, even one as comprehensive as ARC-AGI, it might not be able to capture all the complexities of what true AGI really means.
So on one side, you've got OpenAI celebrating these high scores, saying it's proof that we're moving closer to AGI. And on the other side, you've got people like Chollet, the guy who literally made the test, saying, hold on, not so fast.
Yeah, and that tension, that back and forth, it really highlights how important it is to think critically about all these claims of AI breakthroughs. It's not just about the numbers, it's about understanding the context, the limitations of these benchmarks, and yeah, the potential biases that might be in play.
Especially when you consider that OpenAI is, well, a company. They have a vested interest in making their product look good. It's like that saying, don't believe everything you read.
Exactly. A healthy dose of skepticism is always a good thing. And speaking of skepticism, the article also brings up some concerns about OpenAI's past, like their track record.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned earlier that some experts were making comparisons to Theranos. What was that all about?
The article quotes Mikhail Salmon, who's the executive director at the AI Governance and Safety Institute. He's basically saying that OpenAI's history is cause for concern.
Their history. What exactly does he mean by that?
He points to a pattern of behavior from OpenAI that, let's just say, it raises some questions about their transparency and whether they're really committed to doing things ethically.
Okay, that's pretty serious. It definitely makes you think twice about just taking their word for it.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, the article doesn't really go into specifics about what these past incidents were.
That's true. We are kind of just getting one side of the story here. But even just the perception of a lack of transparency, that can be really damaging, especially in a field like AI, which is, so new and powerful and has the potential to impact, like, all of us.
Right. If people start losing trust in the companies and the researchers who are building AI, it could set the whole field back. It could make people afraid of the technology, even if it has the potential to do a lot of good.
And that fear, that distrust, it could lead to like knee-jerk reactions, bad regulations, things that could stifle innovation and prevent us from realizing the full potential of AI. So yeah, this whole transparency thing, it's a big deal.
So where do we go from here? I mean, if we can't just blindly trust these companies, how are we supposed to figure out what's real progress and what's just hype? How do we make sure that AI is being developed responsibly?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, there's no easy answer. But I think one thing's for sure, We need to start asking tougher questions. We need to demand more transparency and accountability from these companies. We need to establish clear standards for evaluating AI systems and make sure those evaluations are independent, not just coming from the companies themselves.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about the systems we put in place to govern it, to make sure it's being used ethically.
Exactly. And that's a conversation that needs to involve all of us. I mean, researchers, policymakers, industry leaders, and yeah, the public. We all have a stake in this.
Because ultimately, AI is going to impact everyone. It's already starting to, and as these models get more powerful, more sophisticated, that impact is only going to grow.
Which means we need to be thinking about the ethical implications now before it's too late. We need to be having those tough conversations about things like bias in AI, the potential for job displacement, and yeah, the possibility that AI could be used for harmful purposes like spreading misinformation or, creating those deep fakes that are getting so realistic these days.
Right, because technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It all depends on the people who are wielding it.
And with AI, that's all of us in a way. We're all contributing to its development, whether we realize it or not, through the data we generate, the choices we make, the conversations we have. So yeah, we need to be mindful, we need to be engaged, and we need to make sure that AI is being used to create a better future for everyone, not just a select few.
It's a lot to think about, for sure, but it's exciting too, right? I mean, we're living in a time where technology is advancing at an incredible pace, and AI has the potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a time of incredible opportunity. But we need to proceed with caution, with a critical eye, and with a deep sense of responsibility. Because the future of AI, it's not some predetermined thing, it's something we're all creating together right now.
And speaking of shaping the future, the article mentions that OpenAI is actually planning to release a smaller, more accessible version of O3. They're calling it O3 Mini, and they say it'll be available to researchers and developers in the coming weeks.
Yeah, they're framing it as a way to democratize access to AI, to let more people experiment and innovate, which, on the surface sounds like a good thing, but it also raises a whole other set of questions, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Like, well, what happens when a powerful AI model like O3 becomes more widely available? What safeguards are in place to prevent it from being misused? I mean, we've already seen how quickly misinformation can spread online, how deepfakes can be used to manipulate people. Imagine what could happen if those tools become even more powerful, even easier to use.
It's a scary thought.
Mm.
And it really underscores the need for, like you said, those ethical guidelines, those safety protocols, those mechanisms for accountability. We need to be thinking about these things now before it's too late.
We need to be proactive, not reactive. We need to be anticipating the potential risks and figuring out ways to mitigate them while also fostering the responsible development and use of AI. It's a delicate balance, but it's one we need to strike if we want to harness the power of AI for good.
And to do that, it sounds like we all need to be part of the conversation. Researchers, policymakers, industry leaders, and, yes, everyday people like us.
We can't just leave it to the experts to figure it all out. We all have a role to play. We need to stay informed, engage in dialogue, challenge assumptions, and demand better from the companies and institutions that are building the future of AI.
Because like we've been saying, the future of AI isn't predetermined. It's something we're all creating together. And hopefully, this deep dive has given you some food for thought, maybe even inspired you to become a more active participant in this crucial conversation.
It's been great exploring these complex and frankly pretty mind-blowing issues with you today. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep learning, keep asking questions, and yeah, keep diving deep.
It's kind of wild to think about, we're talking about this technology that has the potential to like revolutionize everything, but we're also grappling with these huge questions about like trust and ethics and responsibility.
It's definitely a moment where, we have to be careful. We can't just get swept up in all the hype, the AI is going to solve everything narrative. We need to be realistic about the potential downsides too.
Yeah, it's not just about building the coolest, most powerful AI, right? It's
Yeah.
about making sure it's used for the right reasons, in the right way.
Exactly. And that's going to require, I think, a real shift in how we approach AI development. It's not enough to just focus on the tech itself. We need to be just as invested, if not more so, in developing those ethical frameworks, those safety protocols, all those things that help ensure that AI is a force for good, not for harm.
And it sounds like, based on what we've been talking about, there's still a lot of work to do on that front.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's a lot of ground to cover. But the good news is I think there's a growing awareness of these issues, you know? People are starting to ask the tough questions. There's more of a focus on responsible AI development. So
I'm hopeful.
I like that. Hopeful. Because it can be easy to get overwhelmed by all of this, right? It's complex, it's rapidly evolving, and it can feel like, well, what can I do? I'm not a tech expert.
I hear you. But the thing is, we all have a role to play, you know?
Hmm.
You don't have to be a coder or a researcher to contribute to a more responsible AI future. So what can we do? Like, what are some concrete steps that everyday people can take?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's just staying informed, right? Educating yourself about AI, about what it can do, about the potential risks and benefits. There are so many great resources out there, books, articles, podcasts, you know. You don't have to become an expert, but just having a basic understanding of the technology can make a huge difference.
Right. Knowledge is power and all that.
And once you've got that knowledge, you can start using it. Talk to your friends and family about AI. Share your thoughts online. Reach out to your elected officials. You know, make your voice heard.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Challenge assumptions. Demand transparency from those companies that are developing AI.
Because ultimately, the future of AI, it's not something that's happening to us, it's something we're all creating together. And the more we engage in these conversations, the more we hold those in power accountable, the more likely we are to create an AI future that benefits everyone.
It's been a really thought-provoking conversation. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but it's clear that there's still so much more to explore.
Oh, yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg, really. But hopefully, it's given our listeners a good starting point, you know, something to build on.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, stay curious, and as always, keep those questions coming. We'll see you next time.
Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay optimistic. The future of AI is in our hands.